So to begin with, the VR Summer Youth Program, the purpose really was to extend VR's reach to be able to deliver those pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities that may not otherwise have any involvement with VR and therefore not necessarily would be receiving these types of services. As I mentioned, some of you on the line did participate in the Summer Youth Program last year, which was the first time we offered it. And last year we reached more than 1,300 students, so that was really good, and we're hoping to reach even more this year. Something that has changed since last year is that this year we have enlisted the help of only our VR employment services contract providers to deliver this service. I do want to just clarify there that in case we do have some other providers on the line that do not have an employment services contract with VR, that is different. Just because you participated in the VR Summer Youth Program last year, that does not mean that you have a contract with VR, because that is one of the questions that I have received. The employment services contract is completely separate, and there's a different process for that. If you are not currently a VR employment services contract provider, you can begin the process to do so. I caution you that it does take approximately 6 to 12 weeks to complete, but there is still time if you wanted to participate in this opportunity. There will also be a school district application, so schools will be able to participate in this opportunity, but they're going to have a separate application. We are developing that at the moment, and information will be forthcoming to the schools. All right. First thing I want to clear up with the providers is that, with you all, is that you will not receive referrals from VR for any students that participate in this program. So basically, you are all expected to recruit the students to participate in your program, and those students should not be VR customers or receiving services from VR through STAR. While you participate in the delivery of services for the Summer Youth Program, you can still continue to receive referrals from VR for those students that we are getting through the STAR system and also traditional VR. The only thing is that you cannot serve those students that you receive as referrals as participants in the Summer Youth Program. If you happen to recruit a student who has already been referred to VR, say through the STAR system, you can still deliver the pre-employment transition service to that student, but you would receive the STAR rate of service, not the Summer Youth Program rate of service. In addition, the students that you serve that way that were referred to you, say, through the STAR system would not count toward the minimum number of 10 students that you were required to serve under the Summer Youth Program. And in regards to recruiting students, some of you may have knowledge of how to do this, and this may be new for others of you. At the latter part of this call, we do have a guest from the Department of Education, Wendy Meddy, and she is going to give you some guidance in ways that you can best collaborate with your local school district so you can begin to recruit those participants. Okay, so with the Summer Youth Program, there are 4 primary pre-employment transition services. Just like we did last year, we have career exploration, work readiness training, work experience, and self-advocacy. And each of these services is described in detail on page 2 of your application. Each student that participates in this program must receive 50 hours of service, including any one or all of the pre-employment transition services in any combination of hours. So the intent was that providers really focus on whatever pre-employment transition services they are skilled to deliver. So you don't have to deliver all 4 of these pre-employment transition services if that's not in your wheelhouse. You may want to include 2 or 3 in your program. You have some flexibility in developing your program, as long as the total number of hours of service is 50 provided to each individual. Okay? And you are required to deliver these services to a minimum of 10 students. And that's important to remember because you will not be paid if you serve less than 10 students. 10 is the minimum. Oh, just to let you know, there are no presentation slides with this conference call. I just have that one slide up for you to recognize the conference call you're on, but all the information is going to be provided to you just verbally. There are no presentation slides. I just noticed a question from some. So I didn't forget to advance the slides. There just are no slides. Okay. And this is all information that is in your application. Like I said at the beginning of the call, I'm just highlighting some specific details. Okay. All right. Payment for the delivery of these services in this program is going to be through purchase order. And providers are going to be paid per student. You're going to be paid at a rate of $2,300 for each student that receives 50 hours of pre-employment transition services. In case this is a little different from last year, so there will be no cost analysis or budget required with your application because of the way we've structured the payment this year, which is per individual served. Again, remember you must serve a minimum of 10 students to receive payment. You can serve more than 10, and I will get to that information in a little bit to explain to you how that works. When you submit your application, the purchase order process will be initiated. So I want to make it clear that submitting your application for the Summer Youth Program is different from the process on the back end where a purchase order will be completed for you. The amount of the purchase order is going to be based on the number of students that you tell us you plan to serve, and there's a spot for that on your application. For example, if you say that you're going to serve 10, then your purchase order will be for $23,000. As I just said, you can serve less students than the value of your purchase order, but you cannot serve more. And when I say you can serve less, as long as you have the minimum of 10. So, for example, if on the application you indicate that you're going to serve 20 students and you serve 15, your purchase order would have the amount of serving 20 students, but you would only be paid for the 15 students that you have served. Because, again, you have already met that minimum of 10. Now, in addition, if you say you're going to serve 15 students and your purchase order is for the amount of service to 15 individuals, even if you serve 20 students, you will not be paid for those extra 5. You cannot be paid more than what the value of your purchase order is. Okay, so as I mentioned on the application, you must indicate the number of students that you anticipate serving. I suggest that if you're concerned about students possibly dropping out of your program before completing their 50 hours, and thus making you drop to less than 10 students served, then plan to overserve by a few students to ensure that you still make your minimum of 10. Okay, as I stated before, your application is not your purchase order. You cannot begin services as soon as you submit your application. I want to repeat that. Do not begin services after submitting your application. You must wait until you receive your final approved purchase order. If you were to begin any services before your final approved purchase order, you will not be paid. Okay, just looking at the questions, we have one. Why a minimum of 10? We can only serve 6 students for this summer. Really, the program was based on actually serving a minimum of 10 even last year, where we were serving blocks of students, 10 students or 15 students. 10 seemed to be a manageable number for our providers. As I mentioned before, you can continue to receive referrals through VR, through our traditional process, and through STAR. So if you do not feel that you're able to meet the 10 requirements, then this might not be an opportunity that you want to participate in. The purpose of this program is to reach these larger groups of individuals. So that's why we set the minimum at 10 again for this year. And one moment while I just take a look at some of the questions we have coming in. Okay, looks like we have quite a few questions. Just a moment. Okay, the question is, one application covers all locations listed on the application. That's correct. There is a section on the application, I believe, where you can indicate all the places where you plan to deliver services. So you're covered under that one application. Okay, let's see. Do we require a separate referral for each VR area we are providing service in? Again, you are not going to be receiving referrals for the students participating in this service. There is only one application required for each area or county that you're providing these services in. Is there a staff-student ratio? Generally, I would say as, not necessarily staff-student ratio, but as you would when you're delivering the pre-placement training, as you typically would under the pre-employment transition services, we suggest 10 to 12 students. You want to make sure it's in a manageable amount so that your staff can have enough time to devote to those students in the class. So 10 to 12 for any of the instructional components of the program would be the guideline. Will vendors have access to the STAR system for referrals? As I mentioned before, yes, you will. You can continue to receive referrals, but if you receive a referral through the STAR system, those students are not counted as participants of the VR Summer Youth Program, and you will be paid through the STAR rate of service, not the VR Summer Youth Program's rate of service. It's totally separate. If you have students enroll at the last minute, can you amend the purchase order? We cannot amend the purchase order. So I suggest that you take into careful consideration how many students you believe that you can serve. Again, you can serve less than the amount of your purchase order, but not more. So if you want to pad your application by a couple of students, that's fine. Again, you can serve less than 15 as long as you meet 20, for example. I'm sorry, as long as you meet the minimum of 10, for example. Are multiple purchase orders required of serving different counties? No. All counties are covered under the one purchase order. And it looks like we have more questions about the location. Again, all of your locations are covered under the one purchase order and under that one application. Is there a minimum age limit? The age limit for serving these youth is age 15 through 21. So it's the same as you would serve, the same population you serve through the other VR programs. As vendors, do we send flyers to the schools? Okay, we'll get to the recruitment strategies at the end. Again, we have a DOE staff member who's going to share some suggestions with us. Okay, all right, let me get back to the agenda and then I'll take a look at more questions as they're coming in. Okay, as I mentioned, again, your application is not your purchase order, so do not begin services until you get the final approved purchase order. The VR vendor registration unit is going to be processing your application, doing such things as verifying your information. For example, they're going to be checking to make sure that the employees you list on the employee contact form meet all of the staff requirements that are outlined in your application. After your application has been approved to move forward, the purchase order process then begins. And that's why we've set the deadline for the applications approximately a month out from when the program session begins, because it takes time to process those purchase orders. When your purchase order is complete, you will receive a notice, but it will not be coming from vocational rehabilitation. It will come from My Florida Marketplace. And that notice will have your final approved purchase order. So the purchase order is your binding agreement between VR and you to deliver the agreed upon services. So make sure you pay attention to any email you receive from My Florida Marketplace, again, as the purchase order will not be coming from vocational rehabilitation. Okay, there are 2 sessions for this program. We have sessions A and B. A begins May 1st and ends June 30th. And session B begins July 1st and ends August 31st. You can participate in one or both of these sessions. That's up to you. You must, however, submit one application for each session you are issued, because for each session you're going to be issued one purchase order. Okay? So one application for each session, which is also going to equal one purchase order for each session. All 50 hours of service must be completed within the designated program session. You cannot spread hours over the 2 sessions, nor can the requirement to serve 10 students be spread over 2 sessions. So if you're delivering services in session A, you must serve 10 students, and each of those 10 students has to have had 50 hours of services within that session. Same with session B. It's possible if you run multiple classes throughout the session, say you have 5 students participating in one class, that's fine. Again, what matters is that by the end of the session, you must have delivered 50 hours of services to at least 10 students throughout that entire program session. Okay, although it is possible to serve the same students in both sessions, remember that the intent is to reach as many students as possible. So you're not prohibited from serving the same students in both sessions, but the services that they receive really should vary from session to session. For example, if a student completed a work experience at one location in session A, they should complete a work experience in session B, probably at a different location. Okay? So we do not want the same exact services duplicated for an individual. All right, let me take a moment to look at some of the questions we have. When we submit the application, do we need to attach the 504 or IEP for each client? And when we submit the application, do we need Okay, that was repeated. I'm actually going to cover that in a little bit, but I can go ahead and say right now the 504 and IEP do not need to be attached, but you do need to verify on the student tracking sheet that you know whether or not they have a 504 or IEP, and in the case of audit, you would need to be able to produce that information. Okay, and we are at the tracking and invoicing section. So with your application, you received an Excel file including the student disability verification chart and the service tracking chart. You are responsible for verifying and documenting that student that you're serving has a disability, again, as evidenced by either the IEP or the 504 or some other documentation from their school. As I just said, you don't need to send those documents to us, but you need to be able to verify that. You need backup documentation in the event of audit. The name of each student that you serve should be entered on the verification chart with their date of birth and the name and information of the contact person for the student. So this will typically be the parent or the guardian. And on that service tracking chart, you're going to list the student's name, the total number of days of service, and that they received, and also indicate how many hours for each service, how many hours of each service did they receive. Okay. One more question. How will we know if a student has been enrolled in STAR? Okay. One, you're going to need to verify that with the student, the parent, the guardian, whether or not they have been referred to VR. And if you have any questions about that, then please contact me, and we will be able to determine whether or not that student is in our system. Okay, can last year's students participate again? Yes, they can. And will providers be precluded from working with students who are receiving service from another program but not summer, such as blind services?
Hello, this is Kirk Hall. I just wanted to share, when you have an individual who's working with an agency, Blind Services is actually our sister agency, so it's also vocational rehabilitation. So if they're receiving pre-ETS services through that, again, you would be receiving the payment through them for those pre-ETS services and would not be part of that summer youth program process. So in general, that would be a no if they are in receipt of those pre-ETS services through Blind Services. If you have a concern about a particular individual, let us know and we'll coordinate with that sister agency to clarify whether or not they're getting those services.
Okay, thank you, Kirk. Okay, just want to reiterate for folks on the phone that there are no PowerPoint slides associated with this call, so I did not forget to advance the slide. I'm sorry. All of this is just purely verbal. Okay, is there a mandated time period, as in how many hours per week? There is no mandated time period, so you have flexibility in how you develop your program. But please keep in mind any labor laws that address the amount of hours that these students should be participating in these activities, especially the work experiences. Okay, can you clarify? You stated two different things. So each county then needs a new application. Example, Seminole County is one app, and Lake County, no. There is one application for each session. Each application can cover multiple counties. So you just indicate all of the different locations where you plan to deliver the service, and there's a section for that on the application on page 1. Okay. Another question, if we get a purchase order for services but do not get the minimum number of 10 enrolled, what happens in that purchase order? You will not be paid. And that's why I said if you have a fear of not meeting that minimum of 10, either one, this might not be the right opportunity for you to participate in. You may want to just rely on those referrals that you receive through STAR and make that your participation with VR and not the summer youth program. Or you can also try to serve more than 10 students if you feel that some students might drop out and cause you to fall below that number of 10. But the 10 is the minimum requirement. You will not be paid if you serve less than 10 students. Okay, what if you are serving a child and come to find out that she is actually a VR customer? Please just contact me and we can advise you on what to do in that situation. Okay, so you are saying one student can do both sessions as long as the material covered is different. Correct. You can have some students that are in both sessions, but please make sure that the activities they participate in are varied. And please be reminded that the purpose of this program is to reach many different students. Okay, do you have to serve the participants for the entire session, or can it be part of the session, e.g. 3 weeks? However long it takes for you to deliver those 50 hours of service is up to you. You have the program periods, the beginning and the end dates. So if you are able to cover 50 hours of services over 2 weeks, that's fine. Just make sure that by the end of the program session, each student has completed 50 hours of service. Okay, excuse me. If we add an employee who will be working with the students after the application has been approved, would you like us to send a new roster? Okay, any employee that you add, anyone that's going to be having contact with the students in the summer youth program need to be added to that employee contact form, and you need to send that information immediately to the VR vendor registration office.
And just to clarify, before that individual can begin working with any of the students, they must be approved by that VR vendor registration unit. So you should see that confirmation coming back from the office that that individual has been cleared to work with the students.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Okay. Do you have an already printed tracking sheet, or do we design our own with the information given on page 5? The Excel tracking sheets, there are 2 sheets in that file, were sent to you along with the application. If for some reason that did not get to you, please email me, contact me, and I will send you out another tracking sheet. Okay, yes, and please make sure you pay attention to the tabs on the bottom of that. When you open up the file, there are 2 sheets in that workbook. Okay, all right, each time, let's see, each time you deliver the service or run your training classes, you should be using a course roster to have the students sign in. Those course rosters are not provided, so you can create your own. Just make sure that it includes all the information that's required as described in your application. Your invoices. After completion of the program, your invoices should be submitted within 60 days by the close of your program or the end of the session. The instructions in your application tell you to submit your invoice on company letterhead along with the course rosters, your student disability verification chart, and the service tracking chart. and all of this information should be submitted to us electronically. Please make sure that you do not submit the tracking charts in a PDF format. It should come back to us in its editable Excel file format. No PDFs will be accepted. You'll just have to resubmit. Okay, and back to our questions. Why do we only serve up to age 21 instead of 22, which is the age to age out of high school? Okay, by law, with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, we are to deliver these pre-employment transition services to students up to the age of 21. So that's why 21 instead of 22. Okay. Most likely last year students are receiving VR services. Then it may require you to go out and do some more recruiting. Again, the intent is to find those students that are not receiving these services and not otherwise involved with VR. Okay, can you please provide me your number? I will do so at the end. I'll make sure that information is in the chat box. In fact, I'll put it in right now for everyone. And my email address. Okay. Will this presentation be recorded so we can listen again? We do have a transcription of this call, and I can share that with you. Just shoot me an email and I can send that information to you. Okay, can you serve across county lines on one application in one session? You definitely can. You can serve multiple counties under one application. How long will it take to process payment once we submit the roster? I cannot give you a guideline on how long it will take to be able to process that payment. I would say approximately 3 weeks. But don't quote me on that, please. Okay, can you serve clients into, oh, we already covered that. Okay, my concern is that there is not a lot of time you are giving us to do brand new recruiting from schools ourselves. School is out on May 26th. This is to start May 1st. Okay, the reason why we're doing all of this and sending out the application now and even doing this conference call is because you still have time to begin now to recruit those students that will participate in your program. Even if you do not recruit enough for session A, you still have session B to be able to participate in. Okay, if work experience OJT is used as a component, will additional progress report, final report documentation be required as with the typical OJT? No. Those same requirements do not apply with the Summer Youth Program. Could you talk more about the school's participation? In fact, we are going to soon, let me just make sure that we have our Department of Education representative, Wendy Meddy. If you are on the line, if you would please just let me know. Okay, next question, you can just put it in the chat box that you're here and when you're ready, Wendy. Okay, we plan to complete a cycle of 50 hours every 3 weeks. Can we submit invoices at the completion of each cycle, i.e. 3 invoices per session? You're only going to submit 1 invoice, and that is to include all of the students that you have served the total of 50 hours of services to. So only 1 invoice per session. Okay, do students have to be paid for OJTs? Students do not have to be paid for OJTs. Remember, your purchase order is based on your service of 50 hours of service to each student at the rate of $2,300. It would be left up to your discretion and working within your budget if you wanted to include some type of stipend for those students. But we are not stipulating that you have to pay students for these OJTs. So you cannot combine OJT with summer youth program. You cannot combine the OJT of a student who was referred to you through the STAR system or through just the VR traditional program.
This is Kirk again, and just to be clear, we fully expect that the providers will be working with referrals from STAR and VR, as well as the summer youth program. So the delivery of the service can occur simultaneously, but the payment that you receive for the participants in summer youth will be through that program. The payment that you receive for individuals who are STAR referrals or who are being referred from the VR program would be through that mechanism. Of course, the payments for STAR or VR are the same. The only difference is the summer youth program, where we've provided some additional monies to pay for those recruiting efforts, because these are essentially individuals who have not come through the program. And we know that that's going to take time and diligence to gather together those individuals and to then establish how you're going to effectively work with them within the structure of the application.
Thank you, Kirk. And please be reminded that those students that you do serve through STAR or the other VR program do not count towards the number of students that you're serving through the summer youth program. Okay, next question. Are we allowed to start session A in mid-June? No, you aren't. Sorry. Session A you can start anytime after you receive your final approved purchase order within those program session dates. Starting mid-June is late. If you think that you could complete the 50 hours of services with those students by June 30th, that's really just cutting it really close. I just want to warn you, because again, you cannot extend those services into the next session. They have to be completed by June 30th. Okay, and that is a stipulation of your purchase order, so it's a requirement of your purchase order. So please make sure that any services started in session A are completed by the end of that session, and the same with session B. Okay, would you please give the documents that are required to submit prior to payment again? Didn't get them all. Okay, please send me an email, anyone who did not receive the tracking sheet, and I will send that information to you. Okay, what is the criteria for the students we are seeking for participation in the summer youth program? These are students with disabilities as evidenced by an IEP or 504 or some other school documentation, and they must be between the ages of 15 through 21. Can we target students who have dropped out but have a disability? Again, these are students. They must have attended school within that, must have just ended their school session and planning to re-enter school next school session.
Hi, this is Kirk Hoggett. So for the individuals who've dropped out, if they have enrolled in a post-secondary education program where they'll be beginning that in the coming year, the coming school year, then you can certainly work with them. However, if they've dropped out and are not enrolled in either secondary or post-secondary education, then you would not be able to work with them through this summer youth program. However, of course, they still can access VR services through our regular VR program.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kirk. Okay, and we do have our school representative online, Wendy Meddy. Wendy, I just unmuted your line. Thank you, Wendy, for joining us. Wendy Meddy is with the Department of Education, and I will hand it over to you. Wendy's going to share with us some tips and ideas for recruiting students from the school districts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carmen. Good morning. Can you all hear me, I hope?
It's a little bit muffled, Wendy.
Okay, sorry. I'm on my cell phone. I have a sick child, so I'm at home.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Oh, you are more than welcome. I'm so excited that this opportunity will be available for students to participate. All right, so a few ways to recruit students or suggestions for recruiting students. I know there are some things that the Department of Education that will do also to help. First, I'd like to place an announcement in the Bees Weekly so that it will go out to special ed directors so that they'll be on the lookout for information or contacts from local VR providers looking to identify students to participate. So I would suggest that you contact those local education agencies and reach out to their special ed directors. Another option is to I can share contact information for the Project 10 regional transition representatives, and if you have a good connection with them already, then discuss with them. They should be able to get into the districts and identify students that would be able to participate. And for those districts that are concerned about having less than 10, I can share my contact information with, and I can share that with the Project 10 RTRs, and maybe they can help facilitate more connections to help get those students.
Okay, Wendy, if you provide that information to me, then I'll get it out to all of the providers.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Any other suggestions for, I know you mentioned the ESE directors, was it, and the Project 10 coordinators? Right. We also had a question along the way about developing flyers or any other materials. What would you say about that?
That would be great, and that's something else we could post in the Bees Weekly. I could also see if we could get it in the next topical call that goes out to special ed directors and student services.
How could they get these flyers and the marketing materials in the hands of the school staff that they need to collaborate with?
There could be multiple ways. Again, the RTRs could possibly help.
Okay.
Contacting the local districts or local schools and sharing with the information and requesting permission to drop off at the schools. Those would be additional routes.
So it sounds like the Project 10 coordinators are really their best collaborative partner.
Yeah, especially since they work with this population with students with disabilities that would be identified with an IEP or a 504 plan.
All right. So thank you very much. I know it's difficult trying to convey all that over a cell phone, and we do appreciate it tremendously. So just to review that piece that Wendy covered, the providers wanting to get out their marketing information can contact, ideally, the Project 10 staff, those regional transition representatives, and if you're not quite sure who that is in your area, then you can contact Carmen DuPoint or the Wendy Meddy herself. she'll be providing some information to get you in touch with the local RTRs. In addition, if you already have relationships with the ESE directors and transition coordinators, those are also good resources to follow up on as far as getting out your information and flyers. Since if you are a provider that has a statewide presence and so that, then possibly even some information could go out through the Bs. But I imagine that the majority of you are serving specific areas, and so those flyers wouldn't necessarily pertain to the entire state. But we'll be happy to get your information to the hands of those who will be able to share it then with the students and the families.
Thank you, Wendy. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for participating this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, we're going to continue to look at what other questions we have that have come in. Give me one moment. There is one more here. It pertains to what if they have graduated from secondary but are not continuing to post-secondary? Then, unfortunately, they will not qualify as a participant for the summer youth program. Okay, if the schools start providing this themselves, how will we as providers be able to recruit students? The schools will have no incentive to assist us since we will be in competition, so to speak.
Just to clarify, the number of students with disabilities within the school system is far more than any one school system can manage, even if they put forth considerable efforts to addressing those needs. Any given time, there's thousands upon thousands in an area that can be served. So even with all of the VR providers coming and working together with students with disabilities and all of the school districts wanting to participate, and many of the school districts will not be participating, we still wouldn't get to all of the students with disabilities who can benefit from these pre-employment transition services.
Okay, thank you, Kirk. Okay, that was all the information that I had in terms of highlights of the program and the application. If you have any other questions, please feel free to send those to me now. I see one. Did you say VR will assist in getting vendor flyers out?
We will get them in contact with the person.
What I will do is, if you contact me, I will give you the information for that Project 10 coordinator, and we can get that information to them so that you can collaborate with them and get your flyers into the right hands. Wendy Meddy has also included her information, contact information in the chat box if you need to contact her with any questions. How can we find out which school districts are participating and which are not? We do not have that information, and again, even the ones that will be participating in the summer youth program, that information hasn't gone out to them yet, so we don't have that information available. Okay, we keep hearing how huge the number of students is, and yet we have seen no evidence of this with the referrals so far. We got only 4 since this started.
And I agree with you 100%. It's why we're actually continuing with the summer youth program. Those of you who were able to participate last year will remember that this program was put together as an interim process until we had STAR up and running so that we could deliver those VR services. Given that we don't have all of those referrals happening, we're taking the opportunity to offer the summer youth program to really put the power of that recruitment effort in the hands of providers, which is why you'll see a distinctive difference between payment for those participants in the summer youth program and individuals that you receive referrals on either through STAR or the regular VR program.
Thank you, Kurt. Okay, how long will it take to process payment once we submit the roster? Again, I really can't say. We've estimated approximately 3 weeks, but that's not a guarantee.
And that estimate's based on other purchase orders that we have going through the system right now for our career counseling information and referral. So we're seeing that with other purchase order processes, and we would expect similar. But again, when you start getting towards the end of the year, then it does tend to slow down a little bit. So right before the end of the fiscal year for Session A, there may be a bit of a slowdown. And then for B, there should not be that same slowdown.
Okay, thank you. So it's possible for a participant from Summer Youth Program then to become STAR or VR participant. The student must be served separately. So the students that you serve through the VR Summer Youth Program must be those that you have recruited to participate in the program. You can still, as a provider, continue to receive referrals through the STAR system or the VR traditional process and serve those students, but you would be serving them at the STAR rate of service, not as part of the VR Summer Youth Program. They are two distinct things. I lost one here. Okay, can you send out an email explaining the purchase order process since we have never worked under a purchase order?
Just to be clear, the purchase order process, including the invoicing and the dates requirements, is covered in the application, as well as some contact information should you have questions about a particular piece of the process. As a provider, you're already registered in My Florida Marketplace, so you are able to deliver these services through a purchase order, and there will be somebody identified as your point of contact in the My Florida Marketplace, so they will be getting those emails noting them. Typically within your organizations, it tends to be the Chief Financial Officer. So whoever that person is that's been identified, simply let them know to expect that notification regarding the purchase order by email. If you have any concerns about receipt of the purchase order and want to check up, you can certainly contact any of the individuals that are listed in the application for that.
All right, thank you for the clarification that came in on that last question. It says, no, I mean that the student could possibly, after they finish your summer youth program, be referred to STAR or VR. Yes, that is correct. Okay, if the individual has applied for VR services but still in the process to be approved, are they eligible to be in the youth program? As long as they are not currently receiving services from VR, and it happens to be that you have actively recruited a student that you find out later is in the VR program. But please notify me so that we can make sure there's no conflict there. So if you find yourself in that situation, please just contact me. Okay, if a student was previously referred but was either closed or declined services, would they be eligible for this program? Yes, they still can be eligible to participate in the summer youth program. Okay, what would be the solution for a student that drops out of the program or does not complete the required hours for service? If they have not completed the required hours or drops out, then they cannot be counted towards the number of students that you have served on your purchase order. So as I mentioned before, if you have concern about falling beneath that minimum number of 10 students to serve, make sure that you pad the class a little bit. That's one way to address that. If you're planning to serve close to 10 and you're concerned of dropping below. Can we give incentives for completing? Again, I had mentioned this before, because the purchase order is based on your services to the individual, you can determine within your budget, within your means, if you want to use some of that money toward providing a stipend. How would we go about getting the disability information for students?
You have to get a release.
You will have to get a release from the student school. Okay, okay, wonderful. Okay, if there are no more questions, I just want to remind you, you can always contact me with further questions. You have my email address and phone number, and I will put it in the chat box again, so you don't have to fish through all of the information to find it. Oh, and just know that I will be out of the office this afternoon through Wednesday. I'll return to the office on Thursday, but I will have email available to me. Please make note of the payment and service requirements of the application, and on page 6 you will see the due dates for the applications. The due date for session A is April 3rd. The due date for session B is June 1st. We are available, myself and the vendor registration office, if you have any questions or need assistance to be able to place that application. .org, and I have just sent out my information via the chat box if you need to reach me. Okay, I just want to thank you everyone for participating in the call, and I look forward to working with each of you in the delivery of services through the Summer Youth Program. Good luck.
you.